welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of an absolutely fascinating book. I learned so much from it, and I am so excited for this conversation. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ben Mattlin, and the book is called Unbound, Notes from a Reluctant Disability Activist. It's a collection of short pieces I've written over the years, short essays, mostly, some of which have appeared in major media and some of which are brand new to the reading public.
I'd love if you could start off by telling us a little bit about your writing career and your other books. This is not your first.
Right, sure. Well, I'm 62 years old, and I've been disabled my whole life. I'm a wheelchair user. I was born with spinal muscular atrophy, which is a muscle weakness, a neuromuscular condition, and congenital. And I was born in and raised in New York City, and although I've never walked or stood, I somehow had the sense that I wasn't one of those disabled people, or handicapped, as we said back then. You know, I could pass for non-disabled, as silly as that sounds. And my parents insisted that I go to regular schools. At that time, there were no laws protecting disabled folks. A lot of kids with disabilities either were not educated at all or were warehoused in separate, special ed places that were pretty substandard. My parents, I guess, believed that, separate was not equal, and they insisted that I be in regular schools. I know it was a fight for them, but consequently, I, grew up, fully integrated with non-disabled people, and so I guess I thought my disability was not important. It was only when I graduated from college and could not find a job that reality kind of hit me. Fortunately, it was around the same time the disability rights movement was gaining attention. And, I read about these folks who were blocking buses for access and parading in Washington and elsewhere. And of course, at first I thought maybe they were a little, they were kind of weirdos or something. But as I experienced discrimination in the job market, I began to think, you know what? They're onto something. It's true. I am being discriminated against. I had enjoyed writing in high school and college, and I thought that's a sedentary job. So I applied to publishing houses and newspapers and magazines. No one would hire me. But there was one little paper here in Los Angeles where I moved after graduation. The editor hired me to write a story as a freelancer, and he put it on the front page. And so a freelance journalist was born. It was a business journal. I knew nothing about business, but I learned. And for many years, my income from writing was very small, small to non-existent. So I did some other writing for myself. I wrote a couple of novels that never got published. Uh, and one day, some of my new friends in the disability rights movement asked me to write an essay, like an op-ed essay for the paper, specifically about the Jerry Lewis Labor Day telethons for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. I had been a poster child for MDA. I had some familiarity with the group. I never liked them. I felt it was, it wasn't good representation, good portrayal of disabled people. So I guess I was a good person to write this piece. They gave me some ideas of what to say, and I put in my own stuff, and it was published. And that was really my first activity as an activist. I was never one to go on protest marches. I did once against the telethon, but generally it just wasn't my style. But I found I could participate in the movement through my writing. It took many years to get a book published, however. And my first book was basically a memoir about my life growing up with a disability as the disability rights movement came to maturity. And, it was my first book about 12 years ago. It's still out there, holds a special place in my heart. And some readers asked me kind of to do a sequel. The book kind of ended when I got married and we had kids and, lived happily ever after. Write about your marriage, people said. I thought, that's, I'm living it every day. I have no distance. I can't really write about it. But then I had the idea, my wife is non-disabled. And I thought, people do look at us funny. They say inappropriate things to us, strangers, And I thought, what if I talk to a variety of other couples like us? But let's find out. Are we ordinary? Are we special? What's the reality out in society? It was very easy to find other couples to talk to. There are a lot of folks out there in these relationships. And that became my second book, called In Sickness and in Health. Talks about 12 or 15 different couples. Third book wasn't about me or my life at all. It was simply the realization that 30 years had passed since disability rights, since the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, which was kind of their crowning achievement of the rights movement. And I thought, was that the end? I had lost touch with the community, the activist community, because I got married and we had kids and life went on. I realizing that a whole generation had come of age with these rights, with these expectations of full participation. So I set about interviewing as many disabled folks, preferably under the age of 40, about their lives and what issues were still out there. And that book was called Disability Pride. Came out about 3 years ago. After that one, which was really all journalism, my editor told me, don't put yourself in the story. let people tell you their stories. Well, after that, I wanted to write something about myself again. So, uh, and I realized I had been, besides these op-eds, I had been doing blog posts and a wide variety of short pieces over the years, some of which appeared in New York Times or on NPR. Others were in smaller, less well known outlets. I started to look over all this stuff I had written, and I thought there's a story here. How my views, my thinking, my writing has evolved over the last 30 odd years. And that's how Unbound came to be. Ooh, that's a long answer.
That was an incredible answer. Thank you so much for taking us through your writing and leading us all the way up to this project. I am really curious about the reluctant bit of the title that I imagine came from reviewing how your thinking has changed over time. I'm curious about how your journey toward activism was tied to what you describe as your intellectual coming of age, and perhaps what were the big influences on your thinking as it evolved?
That's a good question. I've always said I'm not a good activist. There's a lot of better activists out there. And I could, point people at a number of them. I mean, a good activist, I guess, has a vision of how society should be and doesn't hold back, isn't afraid of offending people. I'm not that good. I wanted to write from the beginning, and this became a subject I knew and could write about. Uh, so which, I mean, one kind of serves the other. Disability issues and activism give me a subject to write about. But I also, as I met and interacted with people, many of whom have passed away, but that earlier generation of activists, I came to understand the vision of a fully accessible society. It's not just about ramps or braille or sign language interpreters. There are so many aspects, there's such a diversity of people with disabilities and chronic conditions, which I had not understood at first. The international symbol of access is a stick figure in a wheelchair. But not all disabled people use wheelchairs. The language has to evolve too. Somebody pointed out to me, don't say able-bodied when you mean non-disabled, because there are disabled people who are able-bodied. People with autism, perhaps, or intellectual disabilities, or all kinds of chronic health conditions. So I guess I began to see this idea, of a society that embraced this broad diversity and welcomed it instead of making it a fight for every little piece of access. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. A lot of this is tied to the what you've called the social aspects of disability. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that tied to sort of the way that society either does or doesn't provide access?
Right. I mean, on the one hand, there's, your own body and what it can do and can't do, sort of the medical aspects, the practical, technological aspects of living with a disability, but that's not all there is to it. There's, getting along in society, being able to get to public places, and having access to love and romance and sex and everything else that everybody wants to have. I think there's also something I've learned in learning about disability history and the many disabled folks who've come before who've been largely erased in the popular tellings of history, but have contributed to society. We've always had disabled people, and they've always done stuff. And once I realized the breadth and depth of the disability community, I become proud to identify with that group. So I think there is I guess that's what I mean by the social aspect, to feel part of that club. It takes a while for some people. You think of it as an individual struggle, disability, but it shouldn't be. Yeah, there is a community and a history, and I think the more we recognize that, the better.
Absolutely. Could you talk a little bit about your use of humor throughout the book? Because your writing is very funny at times. And, I think a lot about humor because oftentimes humor can be very defensive or distancing. But in your writing, it's very inviting and it makes things accessible. It creates closeness rather than, distance. What is your approach to incorporating humor into your writing?
Oh, that's nice to hear. Thank you. I don't know. I like to be funny. People tell me I'm funny. I don't know. That's just how I see things. Maybe that's why I could never be a very good activist, not taking things seriously enough. I don't know. Well, I do take some things very seriously, but I hope that humor does destigmatize some of the aspects of disabled life. I would rather write funny stuff than, hard-boiled arguments of great importance. Because I don't know, I'd like to make people smile.
Yeah. And I think humor can help. When I used to teach, I used to put jokes in where there was stuff that I really wanted people to remember.
Mm,
I think it makes it
mhm,
memorable too.
yeah, good. I like that.
So, for those who have read your writing, perhaps who have read this book or heard this interview and are now perhaps themselves a little bit less reluctant to get involved, where do you recommend people start? Do you recommend things to read or things to do?
Hmm, it's a good question. I wish I had a good answer. I, there's no list. I don't think there's no syllabus. I don't have a syllabus of, you know, check this out, check that out. There are so many good, interesting disabled people writing stuff, not always writing, online, on YouTube or Instagram or whatever. And I don't want to name names because I'll leave somebody out for sure. But I get a lot from that, from the social media interactions with a wide variety of disabled folks, some of whom write books or have, Substacks or whatever. But I would caution, I think, there are large charities devoted to usually to particular diagnoses that they may have some value, but it's important to remember that they are basically medical charities, not advocacy groups, and they tend not to be run by disabled people. Often it's parents of a disabled person or just somebody who's really good at running a nonprofit. I think there is a lot of misinformation out there from that kind of group. I could point fingers, but I don't want to do that. It's very important if someone, a non-disabled person, especially, or even a newly disabled person, is getting information that it's authentic, that it really comes from actual people who are self-advocating. I have found those kinds of interactions very valuable. As I said at the beginning, when the only sense I had of other disabled folks was when I got from the charity telethon. The poor kids who are going to die if you don't send in your dollars. Who wants to be part of that? Well, when I met actual people like me that I could respect, who had done things and had thought about their disabilities and the way society treats them and how it interacts with disabled folks. I came to see disabled people in general and really myself, that part of me in a whole new light. So I would at least say that. Make sure whoever you're reading or listening to is the real thing. Not just a do-gooder who's looking for money or sympathy.
Yeah, that was a fantastic answer. I think that is all really good advice for where to start looking for those authentic voices. This has been absolutely lovely, and I am so excited to share this book with our patrons and our listeners. Just before we go, what is next for you? Are you writing right now? What's on your horizon?
That's a good question. I wish I knew. I have a day job as a journalist for a financial publication and website, which keeps me busy. But I do miss the more personal, creative writing that I've done that I hope is reflected in the pieces in this book. And if anybody has an idea what my next book should be, I hope they'll email me because I'm stuck.
All right, well, listeners, that means that you have homework now. Please check out Unbound, Notes from a Reluctant Disability Activist. And if you have any more ideas for books, just get in touch with the show. I'll pass them on.
Super.
Thank you again for joining us. This has been so lovely.
Thank you for having me. Been a pleasure.
All right, listeners, thank you. It is time to close this chapter. See you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.